I'm going to get started with this story that seems to be taking over a lot of my social media feeds because there's a lot of journalists and media people on there, and they're all, well, the conservative Christians are very mad at one reporter in particular this week because they didn't like the coverage she gave, which in my view is her describing who they are. Okay, so here's the one thing we know heading into the 2024 elections. If Donald Trump wins again, which is a possibility, he will surround himself with Christian nationalists who believe the Bible, not the US Constitution, ought to dictate how we run the country. And it's only their conservative interpretation of the Bible that counts. That's kind of what's scary about it. You could see that with abortion rights right now, where they want no abortion at any cost, at any time. And it's so extreme that you now have like that judge in Alabama saying, yeah, IVF doesn't count either. You can't do that the way it's been done because an embryo is a person. And he used the Bible to cite his ruling. And maybe that's just one judge, but that's where we're going with Christian nationalism. We talked a long while ago about Project 2025, which if you haven't heard of that, go Google it right now. Project 2025. It's basically the playbook for the next Trump administration, or at least the next Republican administration. And it talks about what their priorities would be and how they're going to, hit the ground running and do all this Christian nationalism type of stuff. It's scary. Then you have Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who even at a GOP retreat recently, began all their meetings with prayer, which annoyed even some Republicans who are like, we're here to work, which is laughable. But this is Christian nationalism for you. They care only about advancing their religion through the government. And it doesn't matter what the data shows. It doesn't matter if the policies they are advocating for would actually hurt people, because if it's their interpretation of the Bible, anything goes. Doesn't matter who it hurts, doesn't matter what the evidence says. We got to do what we think the Bible says. That's Christian nationalism for you. And recently, Politico they posted this article. Let me share this with you here. There we go. Yeah, look at this article that was published in Politico. Trump allies prepare to infuse Christian nationalism in a second administration. The dateline on this, as you could see, is February 20th. So it's a little over a week ago. But look at these first two paragraphs right here. And by the way, this article, and this is important, is written by Alex Ward and Heidi Przybyla. Longtime reporters for Politico, no problem there. But look at what this says right up front. An influential think tank close to Donald Trump is developing plans to infuse Christian nationalist ideas in his administration should the former president return to power, according to documents obtained by Politico. Spearheading the effort is Russell Vought, who served as Trump's director of the Office of Management and Budget during his first term and has remained close to him. Vought, who is frequently cited as a potential chief of staff in the second Trump White House, is president of the Center for Renewing America think tank, a leading group in a conservative consortium preparing for a second Trump term. Look, I know it's a lot of word salad, but basically they are spearheading the playbook that says, if Trump wins, here's how we're going to make sure Christianity gets shoved into everything we do in the next administration. And I'll tell you more about what that means in a second, but that is a scary thought, right? How much more Christian could anything get? I'll tell you one more thing about this document. This is also from the Politico article. The documents obtained by Politico do not outline specific Christian nationalist policies, but this guy, Vought, has promoted a restrictionist immigration agenda, saying a person's background doesn't define who can enter the U.S., but rather, citing biblical teachings, whether that person accepted Israel's God, laws, and understanding of history. So it doesn't matter if you're fleeing from gangs and you're in fear for your life. All that matters is, are you their type of Christian? And that determines whether you can enter the U.S. That's horrifying. This guy, by the way, has an affiliation with another Christian nationalist, William Wolfe, who has advocated for overturning same-sex marriage ending abortion, reducing access to contraceptives. So this is, in general, the sort of people we're talking about, who they associate with, and this is what they would do if they got power again, thanks to Donald Trump. Like, I live in a blue state. Guess what? It wouldn't matter, because this isn't about giving states the ability to do this stuff. This is about imposing their faith-based will on every state in the country. That's why it's dangerous. That's why it's scary. That's why it needs to be called out. So that article appears in Politico. And soon after, because it's such a big deal that we know, oh, look, this guy who worked for Trump before is eager to push Christian nationalism in the next Trump administration. One of those reporters, Heidi Przybyla, appeared on MSNBC to speak about what happened, about her reporting and what she found. And I want to play this for you. I really want to play you the clip, but I'm genuinely afraid that if I play a clip from like MSNBC or something, this whole thing will be taken down. So I won't play it for you, but I will tell you what she said. She said in a brief clip, the one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God. Let me show you this really quick. They come from God. The problem with that is they are determining men, it is men, are determining what God is telling them. And in the past, that so-called natural laws, it's a pillar of Catholicism, for instance. It's been used for good in social justice campaigns. Martin Luther King evoked it, talking about civil rights. But now you have an extremist element of conservative Christians who say that this applies specifically to issues including abortion, gay marriage, and it's going much further than that. As you could see, for instance, with the ruling in Alabama this week, that judge is connected to that dominionist faction in talking about a lot of other issues, including surrogacy, IVF, sex ed in schools. There's a lot in addition. So she's right about all of that. That is the slippery slope of what happens if you give Christian nationalists power. They want to take over all those aspects of society. They want to set the rules for what you can do with your body, what you can do when it comes to who you marry, things like that. And the thing she said, and this is important, this is the thing that upset so many people on the Christian right, is going back to the beginning of what she said. The thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, and then she gave that caveat, not Christians, by the way, because they're different. She said, what unites them as Christian nationalists? They believe our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They come from God. And that's the part that is not entirely accurate, because there are plenty of Christians who believe our rights come from God. Sure, the Constitution says something different, like we have to rule ourselves, but there are plenty of Christians who say the reason the founders wrote it that way is because our rights came from God. We may have to set rules about morality, but God gave us morality. It's the same thing. But a lot of Christians believe that stuff. What Christian nationalists do is, yeah, they have that belief, but they want to codify it into law in a way that affects everybody. It's like I'm vegetarian, but it's not enough that I say I should be vegetarian and I'm going to have that diet. Imagine if I said I'm going to pass a law that forces all of you to be vegetarian, but now just apply that to religion and abortion and same-sex rights and civil rights and things like that. That's Christian nationalism. So she didn't give the full answer there, because what she described could apply to regular Christians as much as Christian nationalists. Okay, so did she stumble? I mean, a little bit in that sense, but it's not that big of a deal, because, again, she tried to clarify she's not talking about all Christians. She is talking about that faction of Christians who want to impose their views on everybody. Regular Christians who just want to pray, go to church, they're not the problem here, and it doesn't matter. But ever since she said that, Christian nationalists have gone on the warpath against her. Okay. Shortly after that segment, about a week, I should say, after that segment aired, this is a letter that was sent to Politico. You can see the date line on here. This is February 28th, just the other day, sent to Politico. And I'm going to scroll to, no, I'm not. Look up here. It says Family Research Council up here, and you see Catholic Vote. Those are two right-wing groups. And basically, when they say the thing that's important here, it is deeply disturbing, therefore, that she appeared unaware of the opening of the Declaration of Independence or to its references of the laws of nature and of nature's God. Equally concerning is Miss Przybyla's smearing of the Christian faith reflected in her comments. Her statements constituted an attempt to spread misinformation about Christians by creating the perception that they hold unique beliefs that pose a distinct and, in her words, extremist threat to our country. You see what they're doing there? They're saying, one, let's look at the Declaration of Independence because that has a ton of references to God, so she's wrong. And secondly, she is suggesting all Christians are extremists. So all of that is just flat out wrong. It's right-wing hysteria masquerading as like watchdog journalism because the Declaration of Independence is not the Constitution. It's references to God, and yeah, there are a bunch in the Declaration. That was standard practice at the time. It's how you wrote anything back in the day. They didn't even know about evolution back in the 1700s. Of course they believed in God, at least symbolically, you know what I mean? As we all know, many of the founding fathers, they were not Christians at all. Even the ones who were not like the conservative Christians we have today. And who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson, the guy who had the Jefferson Bible, which had all the miracles and supernatural BS stripped out of it. Like, Google that if you're not familiar with the Jefferson Bible. So the fact that Tony Perkins of Family Research Council and this other guy, Brian Birch of Catholic Vote, sent this letter, they don't know their own history. And by the way, at no point did Przybyla smear the Christian faith. She was not spreading misinformation about Christians. She was accurately describing what one powerful group of Christians wants to do if and when they get power. And we know she's right because they've been doing it. They continue to do it. They've promised to do it. They've put out documents saying we're going to do it. Like, what she said was accurate. And notice in that letter, they didn't say that she's wrong that they want to overturn marriage equality or that she's wrong that they want to ban abortion rights. You know what I mean? It is also, by the way, very weird for Tony Perkins, who wrote that letter, to suggest he and Martin Luther King are on the same side of this issue because Tony Perkins has a long history of speaking to white supremacist groups. He once, I think, was managing someone else's campaign and paid David Duke of the KKK for his supporter list. So, like, no one's done more harm to Christianity than Tony Perkins and Mike Johnson and people like them. It is not the fault of the reporter who is quoting them accurately who's ruining the faith or like smearing it in any way. But it wasn't just this letter, because all of a sudden you started seeing all these right-wing groups jump on this. This is from Fox News right here. Christian groups send letter to Politico demanding apology over reporters' viral comments. Deeply disturbing. And again, it's a dumb thing to say because I already went over what they said here. But look at this. The letter continued. Setting aside the inaccuracy, she was manifestly trying to demonize the Christian community and sow fear through propaganda. Przybyla's attacks on God as the source of our dignity and rights are also a direct attack on the unifying call of the civil rights movement, including MLK, who again doesn't like this guy, Tony Perkins, who works with white supremacist groups. Like, what are they talking about? Heidi Przybyla she was not inaccurate. She did not demonize Christians. She accurately described one powerful group of conservative Christians. Like, it's so angering that they're able to do this. There's another guy, by the way. His name is Wade Miller. He's the executive director of Citizens for Renewing America. This is what he tweeted about all this. Let me make this bigger. Here, MSNBC helpfully makes it clear their disdain for Christians in America. She says that if you believe your rights come from God, you aren't a Christian, you're a Christian nationalist. Let's stop there for a second. No, that's not what she said. If you believe your rights come from God, she did not say you are a Christian nationalist. She said Christian nationalists happen to believe that, and that's true. The difference is Christian nationalists want to impose their views on everybody because of their faith. So Wade Miller here, is lying about what she said. Then she goes on. He goes on. Somehow they seem to not mention that our own founding documents make this proclamation, as have most Americans throughout our history. Again, wrong. The Declaration is not like the founding document like the Constitution is. The Constitution has no mention of religion, and the two times the word appears in there, it's preceded by the word no. No religious test, no establishment of religion. That's the document that actually matters, not the symbolic one. And then, of course, he chimes in at the end here. The radical atheist globalists, both words get capitalized, I guess, are coming to try to crush ordinary American citizens. As if I have that power. I do not. If only. Heidi Przybyla, the reporter, actually responded to that comment here. That is not what I said, and you know it. Why don't you play the full clip? I said men are making their own policy interpretation of natural law. MLK did so with social justice. You are welcome to as well, but you don't speak for all Christians and certainly not for God. I mean, no one speaks for God, but okay. She's right in that that is not what she said. What Wade Miller quoted is not what she said. He did not play the full clip. He played that one part and distorted it. But this is the sort of thing these people are doing left and right. They are desperately trying to take this all out of context. And one more I'll show you here. This is from Tony Perkins. I join Brian Birch with Catholic Vote in calling on Politico to apologize for the comments of its national reporter, Heidi Przybyla. In a recent MSNBC appearance, she showed a disqualifying lack of knowledge of the United States of America's founding documents and a profoundly prejudicial view toward American religious groups. Like, all of that is BS. You know who doesn't know about American history? David Barton, the pseudo-historian, Tony Perkins, the guy who has pictures behind there's the Confederate flag behind him. Seriously, Google Tony Perkins Confederate flag. You'll find a picture of him doing a fundraiser or giving a speech in front of a group. That guy doesn't care about American history. Okay? Ms. Przybyla's comments reflect a pervasive bias that not only prevents her from accurately and fairly covering issues related to religion and religious communities, but Politico's silence suggests it condones these attacks on people of faith. There are no attacks. Do you know what the reporter did? She quoted what the religious people say. And they're all mad about it. It's like all these people are like, how dare you write about the reflection in the mirror that I see when I wake up every morning, because that's unfair. It's like, buddy, that's you. If you don't like her reporting, that says you're the bad guy. What are you doing? He goes on, Ms. Przybyla owes people of faith an apology. No, she doesn't. Maybe she should say, you know what? In the spur of the moment, when I was live on TV, I didn't give a full definition of Christian nationalism in the moment, but the gist of what I was saying is not wrong. The article was not wrong. And it's not unfair to say Christian nationalists want to foist their faith-based beliefs upon all of you. That's what makes them Christian nationalists. This is not some mom neighbor who goes to church every Sunday and prays to Jesus. No one cares about her. She can do it. That's fine. This is about this group of very powerful, mostly Republican people who want to foist their views on everybody. She doesn't owe an apology. Politico doesn't owe anybody an apology. Politico must confirm that such offensive comments have no place within its organization. No, they absolutely should double down and say, we're going to keep reporting on you people because you're insane. That's the right way for them to handle it. But you could see like they're jumping on her and her reporting a lot because anytime they can pretend to be the victims, they will take it. That's how the religious right works. You get the point here? Okay. So, after all this, um after going through all of that, she owed them nothing. But last night, Thursday night, February 29th, there was an article posted on Politico that was written solely by Heidi Przybyla. And I'm going to share this with you here. She basically formally responded to what all these people were saying. I don't think she needed to, but she did. The right way to cover the intersection of religion and politics. And you could see her byline there. This is from last night. And I'm just going to scroll down to the important bits here. Every person's spiritual motivations are entitled to respect. First of all, I think she's wrong, but okay, I get the point. Once these motivations take them onto the stage of politics and lawmaking that will affect the lives of fellow citizens, however, they will be treated the same as any other political actor. Hell yeah, absolutely right. That means they can expect journalistic scrutiny. Yes, they can expect fair and well-reported coverage of their political aims and the tactics used to advance them. They cannot expect exemption from criticism from people who oppose their agendas, nor any extra deference for their political words or actions simply because they are motivated by religious beliefs. Yes, absolutely right. She owes them no apology. I am loving this. But she went on to say in the same article, due to some clumsy words, I was interpreted by some people as making arguments that are quite different from what I believe. The confusion from my words was compounded when they were wrested from the full context of my appearance. Excerpts of what I said were promoted widely in some political circles by some activists whose primary objection, I feel sure, was not my television appearance, but my coverage in Politico about the tactics and agenda of political activists who subscribe to a philosophy they call Christian nationalism. Like, okay, you can say those are clumsy words. I don't even think she needed to do that, but okay. Um, she also said, um, I'll show you one last thing. To state the obvious, the above, and what she said is the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists is that they believe our rights as Americans do not come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress, from the Supreme Court, they come from God. To state the obvious, the above is not a good definition of Christian nationalism. Many people have views about our rights as Americans that would coincide with those of many of our nation's founders. In my full remarks, I noted that many other individuals and groups on all sides of the political equation have cited natural law, including the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who invoked the concept in his fight for civil rights. But of course, the question of which policies and rights and values can be ascribed to natural law is in the eyes of the beholder. And again, she is right to say all that. All of that matches with what critics of Christian nationalism have been saying for a long while. Elsewhere in her article, she said, I am a reporter. I'm not a historian or a theologian. But again, she doesn't have anything to apologize for. But to the extent that she wasn't clear when she appeared on MSNBC, I think she said what she needed to say. The problem isn't her. It's the bad actors who tried desperately to take her out of context. If her words were clumsy at all, it's because of how right-wing zealots choose to mischaracterize them. And based on that, if they're going to nitpick over something that tiny, there's no way any commentator could escape their wrath. Like, they targeted her because she's reporting on them. That's the story right there. They don't want people to connect the dots between their policy positions and their desire for what's essentially a Christian theocracy. I mean, it's no wonder Tony Perkins was mad about all this, because there's nothing Christian nationalists like him enjoy more than dragging out a non-story that keeps people like himself in the news. So Tony Perkins, saw that article, and then this is what he said later. If this is an apology by Miss Przybyla for slandering Bible-believing Christians for exercising their rights as Americans to be involved in the political process, she needs to try again. Her words on MSNBC were not clumsy, they were calculated. Politico needs to come clean on their religious hostility. Like, what the hell? How does he still not get it? She did not slander Christians. She is reporting on Christian nationalists. I'm the one who slanders Christian nationalists. She wasn't even doing that. She was just reporting on things they said. I'm the guy telling you they're horrible people. And also, her words were not calculated. She was answering a question during an interview and was speaking off the cuff. Calculated means you prejudged it. Like you wrote that answer out in advance and said, how can I demean all Christians? Let me pull out my note card. She didn't do that. It wasn't calculated. Tony Perkins doesn't know what that means. There is no religious hostility going on. I know a lot of you are fans of Andrew Seidel, the constitutional scholar who's written books about Christian nationalism. He wrote about all this too. He has a wonderful thread on Twitter, and I'm going to post this in the notes here for everyone on YouTube. But this is one thing he wrote. We need to talk about this alarming pressure campaign that's happening right now, an attempt to muzzle discussion, criticism, and reporting on the authoritarian Christian nationalism that is working against American democracy and a free press. And I think that is the way to think about this. This story is not about what Heidi Przybyla wrote and reported on in Politico. It's not because of some clumsy remark she made on TV. This is about a reporter reporting on Christian nationalism. And then as soon as she says anything they don't like, they jump on her and act like she's the bad guy. Why? Because they don't want reporters covering what they do. It makes them look bad. You know how in the wake of all the IVF stories, like all these Republicans who have been anti-abortion forever, they're running away from it. Like even Mike Johnson's like, I love IVF. IVF is great. And then no one asks him like, okay, but what do you do with discarded embryos and stuff like that? But like Mike Johnson is running away from saying what he totally thinks. The reason they're running away is because their ideas are not popular. That's why Democrats can run on abortion no matter what the race is. Because if you tell people what Republicans, conservatives want to do, it doesn't play well because honesty is not their friend. So what Christian nationalists can do if they want to get ahead at all and want to get an edge in the election is try to stifle any reporting of what it is they are doing. Sure, they can have these conversations in private, but the second someone tells people this is what they want to do and it would hurt people, they get mad about it because it makes them look bad. That's the part that I think bothers me so much about this. I mean, to her credit, Heidi Przybyla says, I'm not going to stop reporting on this. Good for her. The religion news service, the Wire service that covers so much religion news in the country, specifically has a beat on Christian nationalism. They're covering it all year long. What we need right now is more reporting on the stakes of the election. If Donald Trump gets into office, the white evangelicals who want to dictate when you learn about sex, if you learn about sex, who you can have sex with, what your options are if sex doesn't produce a child, and all of the above, like they will be in charge of the federal government. They probably will keep the House and Senate if Donald Trump wins. And they will not care about states' rights if they have the ability to tell blue states what to do. Their desires are not secrets here. They are openly broadcasting them. And when reporters state that that is the goal of Christian nationalists, they're doing us all a favor. They are letting people know what they stand to lose if religious extremists, like those Christian nationalists, gain more power than they already have. And I want to be clear, there are plenty of Christians who don't want Christian nationalists to succeed. They believe that Christian nationalists have distorted their faith, made it political, turned away from what Jesus said on the Sermon of the Mount. These Christian nationalists don't care about the gospel message. They care about power. But if there's one thing we've learned from decades of fighting the religious right, it's that that side can always rely on pretending to be persecuted to rally their troops. They love acting like victims no matter how much power and control they actually have. And at a time when LGBTQ people and women and refugees are like quite literally fighting for their lives, the Christian nationalists leading those attacks have the audacity to pretend to be persecuted. So Heidi Przybyla called them out on it with evidence. So now they're going after her. And they'll go after anyone else who describes their mission to a wider audience, especially if those reporters already have a big platform. They write for a major news site, they are on TV. They've done it to Joy Reid of MSNBC as well, because they know damn well that Americans want nothing to do with their faith-based control and cruelty. So the more exposure it gets, the harder it becomes to implement. Kudos to Heidi Przybyla for writing about it and for pushing back. I think her article, that clumsy line aside, that's more than she needed to do because she had nothing to apologize for. But if it calms some people, I guess good. It's not. They're never going to just be like, well, you apologize. I guess we'll turn away. Like, no, they're never going to do that. They just want to pretend they're the victims. How's that for a story? All right. Den, what questions do we have? I haven't seen any of this. Thank you, Sonic Shroom, for the donation there. I'm Australian, but given the world political status of the US, I see this as a ploy to take over the whole world. I am still worried. You know what? I'm sorry to say this, but I think you're right. I mean, you should be, because, again, this is the American arrogance speaking here, but what happens in the US has an impact on what happens in other parts of the world. So if we do something, I mean, I think France, as we speak, they are literally passing a law to protect abortion rights because they see what's happening in America. Our Christian right and the powers that come from that have a direct impact on what laws they're trying to pass, because they could see this stuff coming from a mile away. So, I mean, I guess you're welcome that we're the canary in the coal mine. Keep your government run healthcare before the rest of us try to take it away from you. But yeah, it's scary to think about what might happen. This is why I get so mad at people who say, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden in November, or I'm going to stay on the sidelines and not vote at all, because all that does is make the country, the world, a worse place. And it definitely hurts the most vulnerable people among us. And listen, you can criticize Biden all you want. I've talked about this before. You should. I applaud those uncommitted voters in Michigan last week who did that as a protest. Good. I hope they come back and vote for Joe Biden in November, having made their concerns very clear. But this is why it's important for Americans to vote, and to vote for Biden if you don't want to see Christians take over everything. I should say, sorry, being clumsy. Conservative Christians, the Christian nationalists. Sharia law, but with Jesus. Man, there's nothing those Christian nationalists love more than watching what like radical Muslims are doing in nations where like extremist groups have power, and they look at that and they say, how can we copy that? Because they're on to something good here. It is insane. They endowed by their creator gives them ammo, but creator can be construed much more broadly than the Christian God. Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. It's just a nebulous, intelligent designer up there. Like, they didn't use Christian specific language in the Declaration. They used religious language, which, as I said, was the formality at that time. But again, the Constitution, the laws of our nation explicitly avoid doing that. I think the one mention is like the year of our Lord, which what else were you going to write? There's no more efficient way to make members of a toxic religion freak out and froth at the mouth in rage than to repeat their own beliefs back to them. Seriously, there's nothing Scientologists hate more than people learning about Scientology, and Mormons don't like it either. I mean, it never makes them look good. If you weren't familiar with Catholicism and I tried telling you what they believed communion wafers really were, you would think it's crazy. But because we're so used to some of these ideas, it doesn't hit as hard. And so for groups like Christian nationalists that may be unfamiliar to a lot of Americans, telling people what they want to do based on their faith, if they get power, that could be really bad PR for them. What else we got? They don't handle criticism well. It's weird because they're great with criticizing everyone else. Man, they can dish it out. They cannot take it. You're absolutely right. Remember, they criticized the FBI for highlighting the threat of Christian nationalism, too. Yes. They criticize everybody who points out that it's a threat, even Congress people who speak on the floor of the House talking about the threat of Christian nationalism. They don't like that either. And they definitely don't like it when young women speak up about how they were harmed by the church. They like to suppress stories about pastors being abusers because they would rather say like, no, 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 those are drag queens. And it's always like a youth pastor. Ugh. Thank you for that. Sean, most people are unaware of the danger of the Christian nationalist movement. Glad you're sounding the alarm. I appreciate that. I can't stop talking about it. It is so fundamental to so many of the things I've been writing about for the past year and will be for the next year. And I so appreciate the reporters, and there are many good ones, who amplify these stories because this is motivating so many people to vote, to not vote, to vote against Trump, to vote for him. Like, you can't understand the 2024 election if you don't understand Christian nationalism and the power that comes with it. America, to my knowledge, has never had an atheist president. I will correct you there. They've never had an openly atheist president. America has positioned itself as a world superpower. I think that says something about the state of religion in your country. I mean, I know this is anecdotal, but anytime I've traveled abroad, and if I tell someone I am from the US, like, they look at me like, "Oh, you poor baby. There's a lot of religious crazies there." And it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm in a good blue island, but in a lot of places it can be scary. Yes. And I feel like I always have to be on an apology tour anytime I go outside the country. Nationalism is a big fundamental problem. Nationalism of all kinds is a fundamental problem. If it includes religious fundamental nationalism, it gets worse. No kidding. Because there's no reasoning with people when it comes to religious fundamentalism, right? Like, you can't talk to them and say, yeah, well, I have a better idea that doesn't come from Jesus. You think they're going to be like, oh, well, that's reasonable. Let's go with that. They're never going to do that. So, yeah, that's like the fear of Christian nationalism. You can't talk sense into those people. I'm not sure if I should vote for Biden or we'll jump. I'm not sure if I should vote for Biden or Kennedy. Kennedy's anti-vax views scare me, but his promises to fix the economy are tempting me to vote for him. I promise you, Robert Kennedy Jr. is not just a conspiracy theory when it comes to anti-vax stuff. He doesn't actually have any ideas that would get implemented ever because he is a crank. He doesn't have a political home. Stop wasting your vote. And I don't even think he's going to be on the ballot come November. I know he's trying to be on some other party's platform, but like, yeah, I mean, if you want to throw away your vote and vote for some third party, that's your right. But don't pretend like you're helping anybody out, because you're not. I say that with love. If you actually care about fixing the economy right now, yeah, vote for Joe Biden. Get more Democrats, get more progressive Democrats voted for. Work with a campaign that supports a progressive candidate so that you can move the economy in the direction you want. But beyond that, if you think like, well, if I vote for like some third party random person who will win 0 votes, but somehow turn Michigan against Biden somehow, that'll make everything better. Like, how many elections past do you have to look at? 2000? Do you have to look at 2016 to see the damning harm that third parties caused and offered nothing in return? Like, if you said, I want to vote for a third party candidate for like city council, I would be so much more sympathetic to what you're saying. But all these third party kooks, Marianne Williamson, Cornel West, all of them, they're always like, you know what I should do? I'm just going to go from 0 to president. I'm sure that'll make everything better. It's like, stop. You don't actually care. You want the publicity. You don't want to help. You're not doing anything to help. You just want to gum up the works to help Donald Trump win, because that's what this will come down to, whether you like it or not. The media is an abject dereliction of duty by both sides reporting and dogging on Biden's age. No kidding. Well, I think AOC said this, but like, if Biden and Trump were in high school, like, they could literally be in high school together. That's how close they are in age. And as many media as many media watchdogs have said, we need reporting on the stakes of the election, not the race itself. The polls don't matter. What should be reported on is what's going to happen if this person wins or that person wins. If the Senate gets into Republican hands, here's what's going to happen to the Supreme Court. Things like that. That's what we need more reporting on. So I agree. The media is awful at this. The New York Times, which I need to rely on, has done a horrible job of this. They're not alone either, but it's so frustrating. So when someone like Heidi Przybyla does it right in Politico and covers this important story, look what happens. She gets targeted by these Christian right groups. Keep informing people, please. This is important. Thank you, Elephant. I appreciate the donation, and I will. I mean, like I said, I can't stop talking about it because I can't believe people don't get it yet, but I will keep trying. Thank you, Cat Daddy. I'm with you. This scares the hell out of me, so to speak, and talk about it as often as I can. Seriously, if any of you want to buy me a drink one day, this is what I will talk to you about, and then you will get bored and walk away.